Right, assalamu alaikum YouTube guys. I've not started the recording yet for the podcast, so you guys are seeing me before the podcast goes out. Firstly, thank you very much for being part of it. Thank you very much for your patience here on the Arabic with Sam channel. I know I haven't uploaded anything for a couple of weeks, and but I'm back with a vengeance. So don't you worry about it. So we're going to get into the podcast right now, inshallah. So I've got a hell of an intro for this podcast. Okay, from the intro to this podcast, I want you to try to guess what the topic of this podcast is about. If you haven't already seen the title of the video, which obviously you would have done, let's get into it. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Start recording it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. صباح الخير يا Vietnam! Assalamu alaikum everybody, this is your Arabic teacher Sam and a very warm welcome back to the Arabic with Sam podcast. This is episode 12, I believe. I did do an episode 12, but I deleted it. And that is why I've been out of action for a couple of weeks or a week or something like that, because I put out my last podcast about hadith terminology, and I will redo that sometime, but just I slipped up on a few little bits of knowledge in that. There are a few things that just were a little bit clunky and stuff like that, and a brother who's been on the podcast before, you probably remember him, Shaheen ar-Rahman, he was in episode 11, he was a guest on the show. Go back and check that out, it's a really beneficial episode. But yeah, he called me up and he was like, bro, there's some mistakes in that, akhi. And I think it's an important part of just the integrity of any content creator to admit that there are some mistakes in it or whatever, and remove it. And that's what you can always expect from this channel. If something needs to be corrected, then it will be corrected, to keep all the information on the channel authentic, inshallah ta'ala. So this episode, okay, from the Good Morning Vietnam, my Arabic rendition of Good Morning Vietnam, that should give you a clue that this episode is about countries in Arabic and talking about where you're from. I've done a lot of it's quite grammar heavy. That's kind of my main thing, really. Like Arabic grammar is kind of my main thing, really. Like Arabic grammar for beginners. But so I end up being a bit grammar heavy, and I love grammar and etymology. Man, I love a good bit of etymology. I mean, I love etymology. But Arabic etymology and Somali etymology, that's a different level. I go crazy for that stuff. I'm pretty into that sort of stuff. So, but anyway, in this lesson, we're going to be talking a little bit about that where you're from and stuff. It's a little bit more conversational, not so grammar heavy, but we will get into some interesting little bits and bobs. So you've already learned the word for the country, Vietnam, Vietnam. That's the first one for us to talk about, but that's the first one we've mentioned. But I want to start off with some phrases, if those of you aren't familiar with how to ask someone where they live or where they're from, or some other nuances that kind of come with that conversation in Arabic. Then we'll go through that stuff, inshallah. So to ask someone where they're from, there's a few different orders of the word order that you can use when you ask this question. I just say enter min aina or aina min enter. That those are the kind of the two options. Enter min aina or aina min enter, but both of them are fine. Both of them work perfectly well. The different dialects, the different Amiyas have their own kind of nuances to it. How do they even say it in Aramiya? I know in Egyptian they say fin, int min fin or something like that. They probably say, and then in Palestine people say wen, min wen. Where's it from? Min wen. But in Fusha, you probably never ask someone where they're from in Fusha, but if you're one of the fortunate people who meet people who speak to you in Fusha, then you can say enter min aina or aina min enter. And when you say I am from somewhere, you just say ana min blah blah blah, whatever country you're from or whatever city you're from. And we'll learn some of the words for those countries in the upcoming podcast, inshallah. Often where you're from is different to where you live. So if you're asking someone where they're from, you say enter min aina or aina min enter, or to ask someone where they live, you still say aina, but you say aina teskunu or aina ta'ishu. The verb sakana and the verb aasha ya'ishu, they're in this case they're pretty much synonymous. Really, they're pretty much synonymous. And you can say ana eskunu or ana aishu to say I live somewhere, but it's quite common to say ana sakin. Dialects quite often do that. Say I am a liver in this place. Ana sakin fi, I live in blah blah blah. So ana eskunu. Well, when you ask somebody aina teskunu or aina teskunina if you're saying it to a woman. But like here in the UK, like I'm sure it's probably the case in. Actually, I think it's particularly complicated here in the UK when people get asked where they're from. Like if you imagine somebody who is I don't know, let's say, for example, like one of my best friends here in the UK, his name's Asher. He's like third generation Pakistani. Like all of his family are Pakistanis from Kashmir, and he's Pakistani, brown skin, family speak Urdu, like Pakistani, right? But he lives in Maidenhead in the UK, right? But he was actually born, I think, up north in Keighley. Keighley. They say Keighley. I don't know how it's spelled, but up north, basically, Bradford area. And so if you were to ask him, where are you from? There's a whole number of different questions he's really asking there. And people in the it's particularly complicated in the UK because we don't really have very well defined politics for that. Like I know in America you have problems, but at least in America you have the idea of being able to be more than one thing at once. Like people can say that they are whatever, Italian American or Irish American or whatever, Brazilian American or whatever it is, whatever combination of things that you are, and you sort of accept having multiple identities. But like in Arabic as well, you quite often need to say, ana aslan min somewhere. Use this term aslan to say you're originally from somewhere. And like I quite often need to clarify to people, like ana Britani, I'm British, what aslan ana Britani? Because sometimes people don't believe me. Not because like my Arabic's that good, but because I could pass as a resemblance of being from another place. Like sometimes people think I'm Turkish or Albanian or Syrian or whatever. I get accused of being from all sorts of places. People come up to me in the masjid and speak all sorts of languages to me. But so there is a way of distinguishing that, to say where you're from, and I'm in whatever, and I'm in like Aslan, and I'm in like originally I'm from, and there's also just ana, and then whatever adjective you use. And a Pakistani, for example, like I'm Pakistani. I'm not, by the way, if you've only just joined the podcast at that point, or the video at that point. But okay, so those are just some little nuances about asking where someone's from, where they live, blah, 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 stuff like that. Cool. Another little thing that's useful for those of you who've embraced Islam like myself, it's quite often important to clarify, ana aslamt. Like, I'm not an Arab, ولكن أنا أسلمت. But I became a Muslim. Because when you say ana Britani, when you say you're British, but you're Muslim, like that, people are kind of often expecting, yeah, but where are you like originally from in that case? Like you might be British, but your parents are probably Turkish or Lebanese or something. But if you explain that you became a Muslim, you say aslamtu. You can say, there are two different ways mainly of expressing that. I've heard people say asbahtu musliman, like I became a Muslim. But then, as Arabic does, it's a habit of Arabic to sometimes include a number of different nuances just into one verb. You can actually use the verb aslama, meaning to become a Muslim. So aslamtu means I became a Muslim. We're going to run through some countries together, inshallah. We're going to run through 4 European countries, 4 Asian countries, 4 African countries, and then we'll be done with it for this lesson, inshallah. So, because the first one I wanted to mention is Britannia. Sometimes you don't really hear people say it anymore, but sometimes you read Britannia al-Azma. You use the term al-Azma at the end to mean like Great Britain. Britannia al-Azma. The Great Britain. That's how you say that in Arabic, but I don't really hear people say that anymore because I'm not sure how Great Britain is anymore, or ever was for that matter. But but a lot of these countries as well, something to be aware of is that they usually end in an elif. I know there's a bit of a debate in the Arabic language around whether countries should end in a ta marbuta or in an elif. I usually teach people that ends in an elif. That's usually what I teach people. If it ends in an elif as well, you get to avoid putting case endings on the end and stuff like that. So, and it's what I've seen used most commonly. Nice. Okay, so Britannia, very similar to our word Britain, and probably comes from our word Britain, as does the word England, Ingiltara. Ingiltara is usually spelled with a jim, so it's written like Ingiltara, but Arabs know how it's said. Do you know what I mean? Or something that's spelled with a kaf, Ingiltara. Or the adjective to be English is Inglisi, spelled with a jim or with a kaf. It's like Inglisi or Inglisi. But either way, people say Inglisi. They know how it's said. Do you know what I mean? It's just for the sake of how it's written. You don't hear people say Inglisi. You hear people say Inglisi. Good. Spain was the next one I wanted to say. Hispania. The P in Spain. The P in Spain becomes a B, isb, because obviously there's no P in Arabic. So Hispania sounds a little bit more like the Spanish term España. when in Spanish, España, it sounds a bit more like that, but España, again with an alif tawila on the end, not an alif maqsura, an alif tawila, España. Next one, Faransa. Sounds a bit like our word for France, and like the French word for France as well, Faransa. Next one's quite interesting, Germany. So Almania is that's an interesting one, because usually, like we've seen with the previous three countries, is that usually other languages use the word that the native people do. Do you know what I mean? Like in English, we use the word English in England, so other people use a word that sounds similar to that. Like Ingilterra, it sounds similar to it. But with Germany, we see like completely different ways of referring to Germany. Like we call it Germany in English. In Arabic, they call it similar to what the Spanish word for Germany actually is. They call it Alemania. But then, like in Germany, they call Germany Deutschland. Like I'm not really sure where that comes from. And then the Hungarian term is like Nemetz or something, right? Like it's like I've met quite a lot of Hungarians before, and I learned some Hungarian before a little while ago. One of my mum's best friends is Hungarian, and I learned some Hungarian from her, and I remember her telling me that the word for Germany begins with an N, Nemestag, Nemesterag, or something like that. Nothing like Deutschland or Alemania or Germany anyway. And I just thought that was a bit funny. Like I don't know how that happens with a country, and sort of a theory that I heard at university was that like these different languages, the groups of people who spoke these different languages, they met Germany from different angles. Do you know what I mean? Like the way in which the people in Hungary would have met Germany, might have been a particular Germanic tribe on that side of Germany, right? I spoke to them, and they might have had a word that corresponds to the Hungarian name, and the way that the kind of English, the English direction, in which the English people would have encountered the Germans first. It would have been a tribe who were called the Germans or something, right? And that's how we kind of ended up with those separate names for them, which is just interesting. It sort of gives the idea that people encountered Germany before the country of Germany itself was established properly, which is really interesting to me. But anyway, we'll move on, inshallah. So we've got some Asian countries to run through. So, firstly, the country Sin is China. That's confused me a few times, because I remember once when I went to a chicken shop in Jordan, the guy came out and he was like, I was sitting with a friend with me, and he was like, Bidkum Nisain? It was like, do you want Nisain? And what he's saying is, do you want two halves, like two half chickens? And we were like, is he asking us for like if we want like a Chinese style chicken or something? Like it took us a little while to decipher it, because in Fusha you say nisf, that's the way of saying a half, but in Aramiya they cut off that fa on the end. And they just say like nus. People say nus if something's like half. If you ask someone how they are and they're like, I'm okay, nus. They say that, but yeah. So nusin is he was asking me if I want two halves, but he wasn't asking me if I wanted sort of Chinese fried chicken. So Sin is the name for the country of China. Next one we have Russia. The term Russia, or similar things to it, appear in Arabic literature a good 1,000 years ago. There's a travel writer by the name of Ibn Fadlan who's traveling in the Middle Ages, and he travels to what is today Russia, and he calls the people the Rus. He refers to them as the Rus. When we studied that text, we were kind of taught that those people, the Rus that he's talking about, are like the early Vikings. They actually align with what we in Europe refer to as the Vikings, which is really interesting, like how the Arabs did trade with those people. It was in Kazan. Like Kazan is a majority Muslim city in Russia even today, and the Muslims used to do trade with people in Kazan. I think there's a number of rivers that meet in Kazan, and that's why it was a particularly good place to trade. But it's just fascinating. Like I remember writing one of my essays on the description of the Rus by Ibn Fadlan. I'm interested in that stuff. I'm interested in how Muslim travellers met other cultures and described those cultures and what they thought about those cultures, which is why I'm also interested in Ibn Battuta and Ibn Jubayr and other travel writers like that from the Middle Ages. But okay, next, so we have Yaban. Yaban is Japan. Yeah, sounds That's another funny one as well, because I think Japanese, at least the language Japanese, in Japanese is like Nihongo or something like that, not Japanese. So that's another funny one. I don't know where our word Japanese comes from. I love a bit of etymology. The next one I want to talk about is Hind, El-Hind, the country of India, El-Hind, which is interesting because I think the word India that we have now, and even the word Hindu that we have now, is actually just a derivative of what the Arabs named those people. I mean, actually, I don't think that the word India actually even exists in South Asia until the Arabs came and named them, and named the area El-Hind, because it has India has quite clear geographic boundaries. Like, obviously, most of it is the sea, right? It has a hell of a lot of coastline, but then also just even along the top, like there's mountains around what is today modern India. So it has even geographic, there are geographic boundaries for what India is, and so the Arabs even called that area back then El-Hind when they arrived, and that's even where the word Hindu and stuff even comes from now. It's just like Hinduism is just the religion of the people who the Arabs called El-Hind. Cool. Nice. Cool. Next we move on to some African countries. When we talk about the term Ifriqiya, or even in English when we talk about the term Africa, I'm not 100% sure where it comes from, even the word Africa. I know that even the term Afric is referred to in The Tempest, the Shakespeare play The Tempest, and what they're referring to is just like a port in Tunisia. That's how Westerners would have encountered Africa. It would have just been like a particular port or something, and then the whole continent has been named it, because I don't know if we really see in African languages previous to colonialism the term Africa used for that continent at all. It's funny, how do continents get named? Who decides when there's so many different languages and cultures within it? I love etymology. But anyway, so the first country that I wanted to mention is a country that I have a very strong affiliation to, and that's the country of Somalia. I'm married to a Somali woman. Obviously, my son is half Somali. And I'm trying my very, very best to learn their language. So the word Somal, the country is called Somal. It's not, you actually don't refer to it in Arabic as Somalia. You just call it Somal, and that's the same. That's the same actually. It's not actually the same always in Somali, either. Usually Somali, when you use the term Somali in Somali, you often do, and there's often stuff on the end like Somaliga, Afka Somaliga, like the Somali language Afka Somaliga, or Dalka Somaliga. Like the Dalka is a country, Dalka Somaliga, the Somali country. So you do, but the actual term in Arabic is Somal, and the origin, apparently, I did a little bit of research to my audience on Instagram on this, that the country Somal and actually comes from these two Somali words, which is saw and then mal. Saw is a word that you use in Somali to encourage people to do something. Usara means like go or something like that. So fadiso is like go and sit down. Like when you're encouraging someone to do something, you put saw in front of it. But then the word mal is to do with milking. An animal. So saw mal is to do with, is like saying like go milk it, right? Because the Somali people have their origins in the Badia, as the Somalis say, kind of the desert. They're nomadic people originally, so that's kind of where the name comes from, which is fascinating. A little bit of a detour from the Arabic that we're talking about though, but back to another East African country, is the country Uganda. I wanted to mention this because I've been to Uganda, and probably after obviously the sacred places that I've been, like after Al-Quds, Jerusalem, I think Uganda was probably my favourite place I've ever been. Really beautiful country. Like I'd never been to sub-Saharan Africa before that, and and I sort of, when I was there, just loads of things that I really loved about it. Like I actually loved the weather, the temperature and stuff is really beautiful there, and it's like what you imagine paradise like so green as well. Like us in the West, we're just not taught that Africa's green. We're just not presented with the idea that Africa is green. But I saw obviously miles and miles of like lush green hills and landscapes in Uganda. It's just really beautiful. So yeah, cool. So Uganda is how it's spelled. Uganda is how you write it. Cool. Next, the country Morocco. Al-Maghreb. Al-Maghreb. Yeah, I think that term for Morocco is quite old, but it actually comes from the term, or is at least in line with the term, like Al-Maghreb. Like when people hear about the word Al-Maghreb in Arabic for the first time, they associate it with the prayer that we pray when the sun goes down, or just before sundown, Salatul Maghrib, and it does have that same word, and actually it's because the sun sets in the west, and Al-Maghreb, Morocco, is the most western country, so it's like the country where the sun sets. I mean, it's the most western of the Arab countries, and actually the term Gharb itself just means the west, right? So it's just that it's the most western of the Arab countries. Al-Gharb, yeah, and Al-Maghreb, it's kind of the term that's been taken from that. So Al-Maghreb. I was gonna say, like, because our English term doesn't really differ from that too much. Morocco, Al-Maghreb, we can kind of see where that comes from. In Spanish, they say Marruecos. From Morocco, which is also potentially just from the same thing. And then the last one, Junub Ifriqiya, South Africa, Junub Ifriqiya. I thought I just mixed up a little bit. We'd do like a South African country, a couple of East African and a West African country. Yeah, Junub, so the term Junub is the south, Al-Gharb is the west, Ash-Sharq Ifriqiya would be West Africa. I don't know the term for the Horn of Africa. In Somali they say Geeska Afrika, but I don't actually know the term for the Horn of Africa in Arabic. If any of you know, please put it in the comments. Those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, DM me on Instagram if you're listening on the podcast or whatever. If you're listening on SoundCloud, you put it in the comments, I think. But let me know about that because that'd be quite interesting. East Africa in Arabic. No, sorry, I know how to say East Africa. And then North Africa, Shimal Afriqiya. But yeah. So those are the different directions. I don't know if in Arabic they have any like sayings for remembering the different directions. Like in English we say never eat shredded wheat for north, east, southwest. I don't know in Arabic if they have any of those. That's terrible marketing for shredded wheat, isn't it? Like shredded wheat should sue the people who came up with that idea for remembering the directions. But anyway, that's it. That is it for our podcast. Before we end, I'd like to give a shout out to a lady who I spoke to yesterday about my platinum program. Her name is Eden and she's from Minnesota. I've got loads of Somali audience in Minnesota. Minnesota is like Somalia. Cool. So that's everything for this episode. We're going to sign out, inshallah. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already. And yeah, cool. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Next podcast episode will be a surprise. I'll catch you guys in that episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Right, sound's gonna be terrible right now, YouTube guys. We're gonna save this. Countries. We'll save the episode as countries. I'll upload that later on today, inshallah, so you guys will get it. Alright, YouTube guys, over and out. You guys have a nice day. I can tell you guys actually what's going to be on the YouTube channel. Yeah, so the video for tomorrow on the YouTube channel, when I've got a look what I have coming up. There's going to be some information on a free course I'm giving away. I'll link it up in the description as well for that free course. But then also, we are going to go through some of the questions that I've been asked on the Platinum Programme. Because some of the students on the Platinum Programme, they have obviously more access to me. Like they get pretty much 24-hour support from me, really. And sometimes they come up with just really good questions, and I think, do you know what, I'm going to share some of that with you guys as well. So we've got a little question about using Arabic verbs with a plural or singular. So that's what's coming up. Those are going to be the next two videos, inshallah. So talk about my free course, Arabic in 6 steps, and also a little question about using verbs. That's what's coming up. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.